Who is Black Annis? Is her story based on true events? And how has this story changed over the ages? Hi everybody, I'm Nick and this is Beasts of the Old World, a channel that explores ancient folklore and mythical creatures from across the globe. If you're fascinated by the mysterious and the unseen, then make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If ever you should find yourself upon a broken and winding pathway in the wooded foothills of Leicester, you should beware. For the Wildwood's twisting paths are dark and uncertain, and should the road grow narrow with wild thorny hedges, it may already be too late to turn back. For if you were to look ahead, you would already see the dim silhouette of a broad and stretching oak, whose long old limbs cast thick concealing shadows across the mouth of a most terrible cave. As you approach, like many a traveller before you, you mistake this cave for a welcome refuge from the elements, for now that the light has failed, it's too dark to notice the many bones, great and small, that lay strewn amid the gnarled roots and thorny undergrowth. Nor do you see the skins that hang from the tortured, twisting branches fluttering ghoulishly in the low breeze. You don't know it, but you are come now to the lair of a most fearsome figure, an ancient, evil, bloodthirsty hag with razor-sharp talons, filthy with the old meat of previous kills. She has been watching you from the very moment you wandered into view of the oak tree, crouched silently among its branches. She let you wander past and up to the mouth of the cave, knowing that your curiosity would get the better of you. And now she sits there and waits, unmoving, just behind you, blocking your only escape, waiting patiently for you to turn and look back. She knows you feel it. She sees it in the uncertain way that you walk across the mouth of the cave, the nervousness with which you study its unyielding darkness. She can almost smell it. That creeping feeling coming from somewhere within your stomach, a growing certainty that you are being watched. On the wall of the cave, just before the shadows erase them into darkness, you see the claw marks, lingering evidence of the cave's excavation by its monstrous inhabitant. Instinctively, you back away, but then freeze as you hear leaves rustling behind you. You turn, but you don't see her at first. Your eyes pass over her blue, corpse-like skin, obscured in the shadows of the oak tree's canopy. Squinting, you check the undergrowth for even the slightest flicker of movement, but there's nothing. And then you see it. Up in the branches, a single, terrible eye. Before you can even think to move, Black Annis leaps down upon you, arms outstretched. You don't have time to notice that the crude, leathery patchwork of clothing she wears is fashioned from human skin. Her filthy, rotten talons are the last things you see and the last things you feel. Or at least, this is what children in the Leicestershire area were once told of the Dane Hills, a once wooded region surrounding the sandstone cave known locally as Black Annis's Bower. The Black Annis of today is seen as an archetypal cannibalistic witch figure, akin to Baba Yaga and Grilla, among others. In some ways, this character seems little more than a particularly gruesome nursery bogey, designed to frighten children and keep them from straying too far from home. But there is more to this story than meets the eye, and while fragments of the myth have survived for centuries, whispered around campfires in the middle of the night, her gruesome legend has a hidden past, making her true nature very difficult to trace. The majority of traditional sources with respect to Black Annis are found in Charles Bilson's County Folklore, dating primarily from the mid to late 19th century. If these sources are to be believed, then the Dane Hills were once infamous, and little children who went to run there were assured that Black Anna lay in wait there to snatch them away to her bower, and that many like themselves she had scratched to death with her claws, sucked their blood, and hung up their skins to dry. But are they to be believed? A closer look at these sources reveals inconsistencies and a growing mystery. Black Annis's modern reputation as a cannibal witch took root primarily in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Interestingly, these more traditional sources paint her in a different light, omitting the term witch altogether and opting instead to describe her as a monster, as a savage woman, and perhaps most curiously, as an ominous personage. Indeed, examining those 19th century sources, she seems to have much more in common with a woodwose than with a witch. As time goes on, we also begin to see changes in the environment with which she was associated. Where once Black Annis was exclusively linked to the cave, over time her association with the cellars of Leicester Castle grew, with some stories even suggesting a tunnel connecting the two locations. Perhaps this is because, even as early as the late 19th century, the cave itself was long gone. This was noted by William Kelly in the Leicester Chronicle in 1874, recalling his childhood explorations of the cave and its subsequent collapse before his return to the site in later life.
On my last visit to the Bower Close, now several years ago, the trunk of the old tree was then standing, but I know not if it still remains. At that time, and long previously, the mouth of the cave was closed, but in my school days it was open. I recollect one occasion snatching fearful joy by crawling on our hands and knees into the interior, which, as far as my recollection serves me at this distance of time, was some 7 or 8 feet long by about 4 or 5 feet wide, and having a ledge of rock for a seat running along each side.
As we get into the 20th century, Black Annis's behaviours and habits also seem to have changed. In Forgotten Folk Tales of the English Counties, Ruth Tongue reproduced a tale she heard from a Leicester evacuee in December of 1941, saying that,
"When Black Annis ground her teeth, people could hear her in time to bolt their doors and keep well away from the window. That's why we don't have a lot of big windows in Leicester cottages. She can only get an arm inside. My mum says that's why we have the fire and the chimney in a corner. The fire used to be on the earth floor once, and people slept all round it, until Black Annis grabbed the babies out the window. There wasn't any glass in that time. When Black Annis howled, you could hear her 5 miles away, and even the poor folk in the huts fastened skins across the window and put witch herbs above it to keep her away safe."
This story paints Black Annis not as a cave-dwelling predator who would ambush her victims, but as a roving nocturnal menace with a particular appetite for the young. This demonstrates how tales and characters from folklore can change drastically over time, according to people's circumstances and anxieties. Further proof of this lies in her name, which nobody seems able to agree on. Black Annie, Black Agnes, Black Anna, Black Annis, even Cat Annis, are multiple variations on the same character from over the years, likely the result of people trying to find a specific historical person as the basis for the myth. And then there's the gap. The first mention of Black Annis in print is a passing reference to Black Agnes from William Burton's description of Leicestershire from 1622. In this text, Burton describes her as a religious hermit, which suggests that she had yet to acquire the ghoulish reputation for which she is famous today. Then there's nothing until 1764, when she's referenced in a title deed mentioning a piece of land called Black Annie's Bower Close. Not exactly a lot to go on, except to say that the myth has been around for a very long time indeed. Then, in 1797, Lieutenant John Heyrick wrote the poem On a Cave Called Black Annis's Bower, and out of nowhere we have an extremely vivid text which describes Black Annis and her bower in detail. This is essentially where the myth as we know it today was born, with all of the traditional sources we subsequently find taking their cues from its verses.
Across the hills a winding pathway falls, not far beyond fair Leicester's ancient walls, where once the Wildwood stood, both grim and dour, sits deep within the glen, Black Annis's bower. An oak, the pride of all the mossy dell, spreads its broad arms above her stony cell, whilst delving vales each way meander round, and violet hills with fragrant blooms are crowned, though many a bush with hostile thorns arrayed keep curious wanderers from the cavern's shade. Black Annis here holds solitary reign, the creeping dread and terror of the plain, where shepherds grieved to view their dwindling flocks, and trace their lambs up to the gloomy rock, nor children dared to pluck the flowers there, for infant blood oft stained her gory lair. There was no place on earth that held such tears, as oft as echoed here through countless years. Mothers frantic in their grief did oft lament, and cursed the hag whose hunger'd not relent, while Leicester's folk beheld with hearts aghast the monster of the cave with talons vast. 'Tis said the soul of mortal man would pierce at the sight of Black Annis's eye so wild and fierce. Vast talons, foul with human flesh there grew, in place of hands, and features livid blue glared in her face, while about her obscene waist old skins of human victims close embraced. But time, than man more certain though more slow, at length gainst Annis drew his sable bow, and amidst the muck and gore down in the dell, the monster's cursed body at long last fell. The pious shepherds blessed her end with cheer, though joy was laced with long-remembered fear. Not without terror did they the cave survey, where hung her monstrous trophies to that day. 'Tis said that in the rock large rooms were found, hewn with her claws out from the very ground. Into these rooms they her body threw, yet left the cave's dark mouth open to view, that children's children might the tale rehearse, and bards record it in their tuneful verse. And you, who find in nature pure delight, should Annis's bower tempt your steps by night, before the dawn's bright chariot meets the skies, or evening's dew upon the meadow lies, do not tempt fate, and do not linger near, for the spirit of Black Annis smells your fear.
Heyrick's poem is a hugely evocative piece of writing, but it's also clearly responsible for shaping the myth in subsequent generations. It's understood that Heyrick drew upon local knowledge for the poem, but these descriptions essentially come out of the blue. Can we trust that Heyrick has reproduced a faithful retelling of the traditional Black Annis, or has he taken certain liberties with poetic license? We will never know. Though the character of Black Annis remains enigmatic, the myth has always had a very clear and specific setting. Naturally, this has given rise to speculation as to whether Black Annis was a genuine historical figure who preyed on the nearby population, or simply a monster born in the mind of a poet and shaped by the fears of those who once lived in the shadow of her myth. So are there any clues in the local history that might explain who, or what, Black Annis really was? Behind every legend there is a grain of truth, and some believe that Black Annis's story may have roots in a genuine historical figure. The first name often mentioned in connection with Black Annis is that of Agnes Scott. Very little is known about her, but it is thought that she was a Dominican nun who once ran a leper colony, before eventually retiring to a hermitage in a cave, where she would dedicate her remaining days to prayer in solitude. Agnes Scott was buried in the grounds of Swithland Church, now known as St Leonard's, where her flat gravestone, inlaid with plates of brass, lay in the body of the chancel, since removed to the present vestry. The brass that once covered the grave, featuring a picture of a veiled woman, is now upon the church wall. Underneath it runs the following inscription. Now, I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce the Latin, but it roughly translates to, "Here in this chamber lies Agnes Scott, veiled cave dweller, called Devoted by Lady Ferrers. Whoever you are who pass by, I ask you, speak a prayer. I am what you will be, and I was what you are. Pray for me, I beg, pray." The interesting thing about this epitaph is the phrase Antrix Devota. The Latin here is ambiguous, but Antrix seems to come from the word antrum, which means cave, suggesting that Agnes took up her hermitage in such a place. The cave in question was believed to be called Black Agnes's Bower. If true, this would place her within the eerie landscape of the Dane Hills, where the legend of Black Annis was born. Even the fate of her grave invites curiosity. Agnes Scott was clearly a figure of some importance. Not everybody gets brass inlaid into their graves, and not everybody is buried in the chancel of the church. This is a position usually reserved for high nobility, notable members of the clergy, or otherwise extraordinary people. Agnes Scott's grave was indeed once located in the chancel of Swithland Church, but was later moved to the vestry, a functional, hidden space, away from the congregation's eyes. So, why the shift? Was this a simple act of preservation, or was something else going on? Given her esteem within the community, Agnes Scott's association with the Black Annis myth is an uncomfortable one. Could the church have sought to distance one of its most well-respected historical figures from a gruesome myth that had grown far beyond its control? The chances are that Agnes Scott, clearly a very important lady in the local Christian tradition, had her grave moved for more practical reasons. During the Protestant Reformation, Swithland Church, like many churches, underwent extensive renovation. It is likely that during the church's modification into a Protestant place of prayer, the grave was moved to preserve and protect it. There's a possibility that there was also a political element to the decision, but it is likely that any such decision was more to do with Agnes's reputation as a hermitess, a practice discouraged within the Protestant Church, rather than any association with the Black Annis myth. Indeed, to my mind, Agnes Scott's ghoulish association with Black Annis seems very tenuous to begin with. Some speculate that the myth once served to keep intruders away from her hermitage, allowing her to conduct her solitude without interruption, but there are issues here too. First, there's no documented evidence of any woman in 15th century England taking up hermitage in a cave anywhere. The ambiguous epitaph on Agnes Scott's brass, as well as the depiction of her in that brass, not wearing a wimple, are the only hints that she led a close life away from public view. Still, the question remains as to why such a person would be linked with this terrifying myth in the first place. Her black habit may well have inspired the name Black Agnes, yet so far as we know, Agnes Scott did nothing to earn such a reputation. The Victorian fascination with the macabre likely reshaped her into something far darker. We know very well today that the most dramatic version of events is likely to be more popular, even if it pays less attention, or even no attention, to the facts. If Black Annis was indeed once Agnes Scott, how did a pious nun who helped the sick and homeless become the blue-skinned, one-eyed, bloodthirsty predator we know today? I find it hard to believe that this transformation came about purely to frighten local children, or indeed because of the anti-anchorite sentiment that arose from the Protestant Reformation. The fact is that other than a similar name and an association with the same general area, Black Annis does not have any characteristics in common with Agnes Scott. So perhaps we have the wrong candidate altogether. So if she wasn't Agnes Scott, who then was Black Annis? As is often the case with British folklore, perhaps the truth lies buried deep beneath centuries of Christian storytelling, amid the tangled roots of older pagan traditions. There are tantalising hints in the Black Annis myth that point to an origin far older than the Victorian bogeyman we know today. The oak tree, said to stand sentinel over her bower, is a key element of the Black Annis myth, and maybe one such clue. Oak trees hold deep significance in Celtic tradition, representing strength, wisdom, and sacred connection to the divine. Druids revered these trees as gateways to the spiritual world, their groves serving as places of power and contemplation. We are also told that the Dane hills were once covered by the Wildwood, the last remnant of which was the lone oak at Black Annis's cave. I can't help but feel that the deforestation of this wooded landscape mirrors the disappearance of the Celtic religion in England that held such places in high regard, replaced as it was by the wave of Christianity that came to Britain in the 4th century. In this sense, the lone oak, standing over a cave, is symbolic of the resilience of these Celtic beliefs, an older tradition that refuses to die out or bend to modern influence. Some have linked Black Annis to the Celtic goddess Anu, or Danu, the mother of the gods and a figure associated with fertility, prosperity, and the earth itself. But with Anu we have a similar problem as we do with Agnes Scott, in that Anu, other than a similarity in name, does not have anything in common with Black Annis at all. So how does a goddess like this get transformed into this? The interesting thing here is that this picture is actually a depiction of the Cailleach, another Celtic goddess, also given the moniker of being the mother of all gods. Blue skin, one-eyed and crone-like, she seems a much likelier candidate than Anu. The Cailleach ruled through the winter, and in Scotland she's known as the Cailleach Beara, the Queen of Winter. If a connection to either one of these Celtic deities is valid, it casts Black Annis in an entirely different light, not as a monster, but as an elemental force and guardian deity. Such figures were often demonised in Christian retellings, recast as witches or monsters to suppress lingering pagan beliefs. To illustrate this point further, Reverend John Dudley, writing in 1846, speculated that Black Annis reflected ancient barbaric rites, perhaps even cannibalistic rituals, that he claimed were no doubt once practiced in pre-Christian Britain. Now, there is no evidence at all to support any claims that such practices ever took place, but this does serve to highlight how religious authorities have always sought to reframe pre-Christian traditions as grotesque and sinister. If the case for Anu or the Cailleach as the origin for Black Annis can be established, then her transition from elemental goddess into cannibalistic hag may well have been a product of this cultural lens, reflecting the broader transition from pagan reverence for nature to Christian morality tales. But as so much of Celtic folklore has been lost in the severance of the oral tradition, it's impossible to say for certain. Indeed, given all the ifs and maybes and possiblies, as well as the long periods without any written sources at all, we have to wonder if it's even possible to say who Black Anis really was, or where the myth really came from. My own view is that we can't, and I think that's rather sad. I'm unconvinced by the links to both Agnes Scott and Anu, and while I find the Cailleach a much likelier candidate, there's not enough to go on to make such a link confidently. My suspicion is that the Black Anis we know today is a distorted reflection of what she may once have been. Whether her tale was reframed and reshaped by Christian and then Victorian influences, and again today in popular culture, is not certain. But what is certain is that it no longer fully belongs to its origins, and that the nature of those origins is, and will remain, a mystery. What this myth does tell us is that folklore is not static. It changes with the times, adapting to the landscapes, beliefs, and fears of the people who tell it. For me, in many ways, that's what's so wonderful about this subject. Black Anis, in her modern form, embodies our collective fascination with horror and with the gruesome. And whether she began as a goddess, as a guardian, or simply a creature of pure imagination, Black Anis stands as a reminder of the ways that we shape and are shaped by the stories we tell. Her legend reflects our fears, our shifting bond with nature, and our need to explain the unknown. We will never know the full truth of who or what Black Anis was. All that remains are fragments, too ancient to fully unravel, and yet too powerful to entirely fade away. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the mythic past of the English Midlands. If you enjoyed the video and want to help keep these stories alive, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to never miss another episode. And if you want to become a legend yourself, you can now join the channel to support it directly. So, what do you think? Is there more than meets the eye with Black Anis, or is she really the nursery bogey we've come to know? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, keep away from any caves beside ancient oak trees, especially those with bones strewn all over the floor. And if you ever get that feeling that you're being watched, remember that the beasts of the old world still roam wild today.